All right. So, welcome to the June 19th meeting of the Transportation and Circulation Commission, City of Lafayette. I'm Carl Virgo. I'm calling this meeting to order. My understanding is that this is going to be a transportation and circulation meeting because we didn't have a quorum of the LRSP committee, but I'm very happy that people are here and also online. So we have a lot of good material to go through tonight. So let's start with roll call, and rather than roll call, let's do it this way. We're going to go around and introduce ourselves by name. I see visually that all of the members except for Lynn and Greg are here, but so we have a quorum from the TCC. So I'm Carl DeGiorgio, acting as chair.
I'm Bart Collar, Vice Chair for the Commission.
I'm Vianney Salyer, Commissioner.
I'm Stella Weatherspoon, TCC Commissioner, and also LRSP alternate. So I'm also Greg Brown, standard.
Can we do a quorum?
Oh, we do. Because I have.
Please stand those representing the Lafayette Chamber of Commerce.
I'm Traeger, LRSP at large.
Jennifer Paul, LRSP at large.
Kirsten Riker, representing 511 Contra Costa and the Streets North Diablo Safe Routes to School program. Sorry, Mom, yeah.
Mike Moran, representing Public Works and Engineering for City of Lafayette.
Susan Kendall, Lafayette City Council member.
Teresa Geringer, Lafayette City Council member and liaison and member of the LRSP. Same.
Allison Miller, Transportation Engineer with Full Design Group.
And I'm Patrick Gollier with the City of Lafayette, Transportation Planner.
And I'm Beatrice Rodriguez. I'm the AV technician.
Pulling the string behind the curtain. Okay. So thank you everybody for coming. So motion, I don't have any changes. I don't think we need to change the agenda and unless anybody wants to, otherwise a motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. None opposed, then that carries. Okay, so this time, since public meeting, we have people online. If anybody wants to make comments on matters that are not on the agenda, please use your online hand and raise your hand, or if you're in this audience here physically, you're also welcome to raise your hand for items not on the agenda.
I see no hands raised.
All right, then let's move on. Big item for today, Lafayette Local Road Safety Plan Draft Report. So why don't we, do you want to introduce the topic?
Sure.
And then also, yeah, let's just start with that.
So I want to thank everyone for coming to this meeting. For the task force, this actually represents the 5th meeting. So a lot of work has already gone into it by the members who are sitting here today, and I appreciate that. We have the benefit of having Tool Design Group helping us out on preparing our draft local road safety plan with Allison Mills here representing Tool, and thank you for all your work on this as well. So I'd love to get Allison is going to format this a little bit like a presentation, but with a workshop, so that it is kind of a working group from the 2 commissions represented here and members of the public. And then the next step after this would be to take this to City Council for adoption, which is a big deal. This has been in the works for almost a year now. So thank you again.
Great. Thanks, Patrick.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, I'll change it. Thanks. All right, I'm going to start with an introduction and some background on this local road safety plan. And slide, please. An overview of the local road safety plan. This plan focuses on the safety of locally owned roads in Lafayette. We followed guidance that is offered by the Federal Highway Administration. On the right, you'll see the process that they offer to develop an LRSP. You'll notice in the plan document itself, we step through each part of these wheels. What the completion of this local road safety plan will allow the city of Lafayette to do is apply for Caltrans Highway Safety Improvement Program funding, as well as Safe Streets and Roads for All funding, and not limited to those as well. So part of the intent. Vision Zero. This plan is also a Vision Zero plan, and quite simply put, Vision Zero is the goal of 0 fatalities or severe injuries in the city of Lafayette. This vision differs from what's considered a traditional approach to transportation, in that traffic deaths have tended to be viewed as inevitable. Our systems rely on, humans being perfect, which we all know is not true. And things are often done proactively, like in response to crashes and such. And it also puts a lot of responsibility on the user themselves. And so what Vision Zero is hoping to kind of flip that, as far as viewing traffic deaths as preventable and not a given as part of our transportation system. We are humans, and we are flawed, and we are going to make mistakes, and that's what's inevitable, as opposed to traffic deaths. And the idea is to really focus on those fatal and severe injury crashes, considering the system as a whole. And as far as a monetary view, looking at saving lives as not being expensive and not being a barrier to implementing safety projects. So I'll also mention that the city of Lafayette adopted their Vision Zero policy in 2021. And through discussions of the development of this local road safety plan, it was agreed that the target year to reach this vision of 0 fatalities and severe injuries would be 2033. And so how do we achieve this Vision Zero? This plan orients around the safe system approach offered by, again, the Federal Highway Administration. The safe system approach offers principles and elements that should be considered and applied in all transportation projects and decisions in Lafayette. It envisions safer people, safer vehicles, safer speeds, safer roads, safety all around. And if a crash occurs, care afterwards being available. And so again, the safe system approach is partnered with Vision Zero in that it views deaths and serious injuries as unacceptable. Again, humans make mistakes, and our roadway systems need to be designed to take that into account by being redundant and our being proactive about making moves to address safety issues. And most importantly, or very importantly, is that this responsibility is really shared among all of us, our own personal responsibility and that of others, to really work towards this goal of Vision Zero. The safe system approach offers a framework, and this is to ensure that if a crash is to occur, it won't result in a fatal or serious injury. And so again, with humans being prone to error, the safe system approach envisions users separated in both time and space. And so that's where that dedicated space for all users comes into account, comfortable, higher quality, and then elements implemented along with this separation in time and space that will improve attentiveness and awareness of those using the roadway, because distraction can certainly be an issue, as will be mentioned later. And again, with the tendency for human error and the safe system approach recognizing this, there's also the recognition that human beings are vulnerable. And there is a correlation between speed and severity of injuries and likelihood of fatality. And so that's where the emphasis on reducing speeds in order to make it less likely that a crash results in that severity or at worst a fatality. Slide. As part of guiding this local road safety plan, goals were established with the LRSP Task Force of brought interdisciplinary stakeholders, and these goals are what continued to provide guidance as we made our way through the plan. The first goal being engage, which is engaging with the local community, stakeholders, different city agencies. And this is to better understand their experiences when it comes to safety, where it is they feel unsafe, coming from the professional side when it comes to city agencies, the local community who use our streets every day. Goal number 2, to promote that safety culture throughout both the community and those agencies, and that to me is in the spirit of that shared responsibility of that we all have to improve safety. Part of this plan is a data-driven component, and so that was also established in the goals, using actual data to see where fatalities and severe injuries are happening, are near misses occurring in certain places, which locations feel unsafe, and so on. And then moving on, taking all that we learned through engaging with the public and looking at the data to prioritize a series of actions and recommendations to carry out in order to improve safety and continue to work towards that Vision Zero goal, and ultimately producing a plan to help in building safer roads for all. And I'll note that these goals and objectives have been put into a set of safety strategies that I'll cover later on in the presentation. And so from here on out, those are referred to as actions and steps rather than goals and objectives. Great, thanks. This plan is preceded by a number of other existing plans and policies and other efforts that already are looking to advance roadway safety in Lafayette. And the vision and the goals and strategies of the LSP are meant to align with these efforts. And as those plans are updated in the future, we hope to continue to have that alignment across all these plans that are looking to help improve safety in Lafayette. To name a couple of these plans: the general plan, downtown specific plan, bikeway master plan, MTC Vision Zero policy. These are all have additional detail in the plans if you're interested. What goes into a local road safety plan? I mentioned community engagement, that being a very important part of our getting a handle on where it is that folks feel unsafe, why do they feel unsafe, under what conditions. A virtual open house was held in December of 2022. This virtual meeting had breakout groups, and those were intended to have folks identify what roadway factors and conditions make them feel unsafe, where do they feel unsafe, what kind of behavior makes them feel unsafe. And similarly, these questions were asked as part of the web map survey that was active between October and December of last year. As Patrick mentioned earlier, there's been a series of task force meetings that were also a part of establishing our handle on sentiments of the community and incorporating them into this plan. Input was also given by email and phone, in addition to the web map survey and the open house that took place. So the web map prompted users to place points where they felt unsafe. We saw a total of 1,200 points placed. That kind of gave us an idea of where this feeling of unsafety, like where this is concentrated in different parts of the city. The most cited location ended up being Mount Diablo Boulevard and Moraga Road. We also asked folks where they feel sick and got about 275 points indicated in blue on the map on the right. What were some of our key takeaways from the engagement process as far as roadway factors that are of concern, intersections feeling dangerous, lack of visibility at uncontrolled intersection locations, speeding, people mentioned, the fact that high speed limits are posted, and then also a concern is safety needs for pedestrians and bicyclists being addressed. Unsafe roadway behaviors that were identified, again, speeding, distracted driving and walking, and users not following the rules or not understanding the rules of the road. And then again, locations of concern, Mount Diablo Boulevard, Moraga Road, as far as like the downtown area, near schools, winding roads such as Happy Valley Road, and also streets near bus stops and the BART station. Crash analysis, which is that data-driven aspect of developing this plan. We used data from 2017 to 2021, making for a total of 47 crashes. 14 of these crashes are fatal or severe. And although, you know, any number of these crashes is like unacceptable, this is a relatively low number of fatal and severe crashes. And that means that Lafayette's goal of 0 by 2023 is certainly achievable, given where we are today. Pardon? By 2030, sorry?
2033.
Did I say that?
So just
By 2033.
6 months.
I wish. So as part of the plan, we developed a high injury network to determine where efforts should be focused first and foremost. And this was determined through analysis of crash injury severity and also density. And the resulting high injury network segments are shown here. Couple key takeaways from the crash analysis. Ultimately, people walking, biking, or riding a motorcycle are particularly vulnerable. They make up a disproportionate percentage of the crashes that occurred in Lafayette. Of all bicycle crashes, 63% resulted in a severe injury or fatality, 33% of pedestrian and motorcycle crashes, 19% of all motor vehicle crashes. Thank you. So, to supplement these other aspects of the plan, we also conducted engineering field visits. And so what this, in general, I just think it really helps to get out there and get your eyes on what's out there. And so we were able to review street conditions, observe behavior at these along these high injury network segments, look at the state of existing traffic control devices, and we also made note of where safety infrastructure seemed to be deficient. And so we also compiled this information about each separate high injury network segment. And so this was another aspect of identifying where it is this plan should focus. And that leads me to emphasis areas. Yes, right. So again, collaboration with the task force, the community engagement that I mentioned, looking at the numbers, that data-driven aspect, as well as engineering field visits. We came up with the areas that the city of Lafayette should emphasize in order to lower and ultimately reach zero when it comes to these fatal and severe injuries.
Systemically across the city,
Right,
not just on the high injury network.
not just on higher injury network, no, sorry, I misspoke on things. Emphasis areas, not only on the high injury network, but systemically across the city, which I'll get into more detail on the differences there later. So those emphasis areas, drawing on engagement, drawing on task force collaboration and the data listed here. Bus stops at intersections, looking at distracted driving, failure to yield, improper turning, interactions between motorists and vulnerable users, lane departure related areas, speeds, which I know I've emphasized a couple times now in this presentation, trail crossings, and also unsignalized intersections. Safety strategy. So as far as the strategic approach to achieving Vision Zero, we established a three-prong safety strategy setup, and that's comprised of program policy and practice actions, citywide systemic roadway improvements, and also high injury network projects. And what also helped us to develop these safety strategies was national best practices, and these are meant to help really target and address those emphasis areas that I mentioned before. And again, we tied back these strategies to that safe system approach, the lens that offers, and as well as the initial goals that we established, and the sentiments of the community when it comes to safety, the numbers, the crash analysis, and also those emphasis areas. So the policy, program, and practice actions, I hope all of you have gotten a chance to take a look at that. I'll ask Beatrice, could you see if you could open that link, that Adobe Cloud document link?
If not, then pull up the other PDF document.
This one, right?
Yeah. And scroll down to.
Yes.
Really towards the end.
Let's see.
Just keep going way fast.
It'll be the big pages with the
Yeah,
tables.
Like all the way down.
yep, keep going, maybe 3 pages away.
After page 41.
Slide
There we go, right there.
Thank you, appreciate that. So these tables embedded in the report outline the actions and steps that this plan recommends for prioritizing roadway safety. The actions themselves are overarching strategies that the city should take, and the steps are getting into more detail on how to achieve that particular action. The idea behind this table is that it's used as a living document. You'll see we're indicating timeline, what's been completed, what's ongoing, what should happen immediately, what's more like a medium-term priority. Before we get into thoughts that you all may have after reviewing, I'll just focus on a couple to emphasize how the aspects of the plan that I mentioned as far as community engagement and crash analysis led us to these particular actions. So, for example, action 2, which is develop an approach to lower speeds at locations along the high injury network. You heard me mention earlier, that's one of the things that was voiced among the community as far as a concern goes. And so this is where we've just given it more thought as far as like, how is it that we can look at speeding and address speeding. And this is as it pertains specifically to the high injury network, but of course, recognizing that that's, you know, something else to be addressed in other locations as well, the high-energy network just being a priority. So as far as the workshop portion of this meeting goes, I'd like to open it up if anyone has any thoughts they wanted to offer after reviewing this particular aspect of the plan. Are we missing anything? Is there something else you'd like to see here? Is there anything unclear or could be more clear about what we're offering?
So Carl, how do you want to run that?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yes.
I prefer an ad hoc, people have something to say, raise their hand, you know, physically here, and, I can just start with, not on the content, you know, I think this is a great report, by the way, but on this particular doc, it would be helpful if, you know, it's very easy to repeat the headers on each page, so people print them out, have the headers on each page, and keep the policy numbers with the text, so
Yeah.
page breaks. But who wants to talk about the content? Does anybody have specific comments, Bart?
Yeah, I have a question, and I guess when I initially looked at the draft of this a number of weeks ago, I had a hard time understanding how to relate the high injury network map to the map that showed the various pings that people put on the interactive map that was posted. And what I want to focus on is the interactive map where people put their little dots or whatever in areas where they felt areas that they felt were unsafe. If you take a look at Mount Diablo Boulevard, the center of Mount Diablo Boulevard is very heavily marked, as well as other areas, other streets adjacent to that. And if you look at the high energy network map on page 26, central Mount Diablo Boulevard is not included in that. And I understand why that is, but just knowing, you know, having both driven, walked, and biked on that part of Mount Diablo Boulevard, knowing that seems to be where a lot of people are concerned, that to me should be a high injury network segment, the central portion of Mount Diablo Boulevard. If you look at this, you just sort of question, why isn't that being included when either end of Mount Diablo is included, and other areas that are, you know, you would think would be less an area of concern, even though I understand the high injury network streets, you know, really focus on the more severe accidents. But I just wanted to share that and get somebody's comment on that.
You know, can I just add something or make a comment about that? So I think if we're calling the map high injury network, my inclination is to keep that layer as sort of the data-driven high injury network, but then maybe there'd be an overlay for the segments that Bart's describing, where we see what the public perceives. We don't have any data that shows anyone's been hit in the past 5 years, but clearly enough people feel not very comfortable there. So they're both important, I think, the data-driven identification and also the more maybe qualitative perception. So, I mean, in my mind, maybe it could just be a different color on the map or something, just to indicate.
Or do we extend the HIN to there?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking like high injury network, it's so defined as high injury, and
Right.
so maybe we have a hybrid that's sort of our, I don't know, what people call safety, or just safety focused network or.
And that would apply, just to take it, the part that I noticed was that in on page 48, Pleasant Hill Road. Not Bible Boulevard to Olympic, right, the part from Mount Diablo to Spring Hill isn't included. So that seems to me a gap too.
Mount Diablo, actually, it's Spring Hill.
No, it's Spring Hills or Taylor.
I'm sorry, would you either call it a
Page-
spelling number or a page?
Page 48. And so it's like a gap, like if you notice on that Diablo. So that was changed.
Yeah.
That's the map, that's what I'm thinking, right? The map is had, then this table didn't have it, right? And I didn't know what I should be doing.
I think that is a typo, because the entirety of Pleasant Hill Road
Good,
was.
I just wanna make sure that's excellent, so.
Somewhere else I did read that it's.
So table 5 used to be there.
That one, you could also just insert that missing segment as its own row, so that you could still rank it, because it would have 0 for KA. And it would have something for web map points, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I didn't see them.
Going back to my original comment, though, to answer Susan's question, I think that the way this is structured right now, you would need to add Central Mount Diablo. Unless you're gonna make some change to how this, the format of this, such as what I think Stone's suggesting. But the way it is right now, I would add that. I think people would wonder why that's not there.
Could I make a comment? I'm Jeff Moore. My opinion is that there are a number of spots that people feel unsafe to use. And so they aren't getting injured there. And that, like, I feel unsafe riding on Mount Diablo Boulevard on a bike, so I don't. And I would include other areas like St. Mary's Road or Glenside Road. There's no shoulders. And those are not identified as high injury networks, but I think they are not really usable for most cyclists, for example.
Thanks, Jeff, but
Sorry
let's
for the interruption.
hold it for the public comments.
Right.
Okay. All right, back to Bart and Stella comments, or you guys?
I've said mine.
Okay, back to, we were on the exhibit, talking about the exhibit. And this one, right? Okay, good one.
Does it say what page?
Slide 48. Yeah, slide 48. We've been asked if there are substantive comments regarding the content on this. Is everybody happy with this? Teresa?
So how far in the weeds do we want to go, or do you want us to do them on the comment section where you sent out the sheet today? I'll ask my question and then you can determine.
Yeah, okay.
So on the action, develop approach to lower speeds at locations along the HIN. In that category, when I was reading through it, my first was to develop a list of areas such as schools, business districts where speed limits can be lowered per state law. It shows that that's a median. And to me, it seems that that's already something that has been in the work, at least around schools. And so expanding that. But then if you look down here, every other part of that is immediate. So I guess my question after reading the whole section was sort of how are we determining the medium, immediate, ongoing? And then I have another question similar, but I think it ties back to the discussion we were just having, and I'll hold that.
Can I ask which row were you?
Oh,
speaking on?
2A.
Okay, thank you.
So anyway, that's probably in the,
On that, by the way, that is being worked on right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that's when I looked at it, I went, oh, it's already immediate. So it's just, I would suggest that be changed.
Something like ongoing.
Ongoing, something, yeah. And then, not so much just, that's a question I can ask. Well, I'll go back farther, but I will find, thank you, Carl, for saying keep them together, but so 13. Yeah, option 13, kind of the whole area, yeah, B, C. And maybe a little bit ties into D. So all of that, as I was reading through this again and over, we've been asked about, so we have the accident crash data. And this mentions, I wrote right at the top of my notes, near misses. So how are we, and maybe that ties to why Central and the overlay that Stella's talking about. Back here at 13, you know, it has medium on that one as well. And I wonder, and maybe that's in the right place, maybe I'm too focused on near misses, but it feels like without that near miss data, we're missing some of the picture. And I know it's the crash data and I know the whole formula and, you know, how we got to here, but I'm just sort of the timing on that. And maybe it's not answerable tonight, but I wanna raise near
I could
misses.
address
Okay,
that.
thanks.
Everybody would do everything here immediately if we could.
Yeah,
Right.
no.
If it's gonna pursue, you know, the Vision Zero policy. For example, on that one way to get the near misses, right now we have what we've had for 40 years, but we don't have a near miss database. And that's people sharing
Yeah.
with us, right? And that's it.
Yeah,
You know, and maybe you had someone who observed it who could affirm, yes, I saw this too. But with the smart signals projects that we have coming in, which are 2 to 3 years out,
okay,
we would be able to implement a database on near misses, and then when we get a call on a near miss, we could actually go back to video and observe all the conditions, the different legs, who was doing what, and have a better idea and kind of classify it, so. And really develop a near miss database, so we actually have funding to pursue, especially at our downtown, which is great. But I see that being 3 years away at the soonest,
Yeah.
which to me would make it a medium,
okay.
just right off the bat.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry, how would you? Who reports in your misses? How's that
It would
information?
still have to be the public or somebody that saw it, but now we can go verify it. You know, from an office somewhere, looking at a video in a cloud.
So is that what 13B is, the video-based artificial intelligence near miss analysis?
It could be.
And how
See,
that
that sounds-
what is this?
That's all, and that sounds normal. Somebody would, and I'm sure they're gonna develop it, somebody will develop this, I'm sure.
Yeah, there will be more to it than just that, but it will be more verifiable.
Yeah, I mean, part of it will be in the smart signals. Sorry, just part of where I felt it tied to the discussion is that some anecdotal beginning evidence is populated in the map, in the web map at Mount Diablo and Moraga. And while we were there for the bike, yeah, so we're bike wherever it is. And we have a station there. You could, I think all of us were sort of standing there going, do we have cameras on? Because you could just see for quite a lot of things that were really nice. Anyway, so in terms, I appreciate everything that's on here. I'll have another question in a minute, but I'll let us go on. I just, yes, Mike, you know, I wanted. But I appreciate where we are. They're just a few little things.
I'm agree with you completely, Teresa. The near misses has come up before in this committee as well as at TransCirc and City Council. I'm just wondering if a more immediate, is there any reason we can't do a map-based something? Is there anything that's lower cost, just to get some data? Because I do think it's really important. And it does feel like once we state it, it kind of goes into an abyss of information. Is there something we can do more immediately?
Isn't the 13C street story available and free and ready to use? The street story tool, the one I know is on the Safe Trek website. That you get to it when you're looking at, I think when you're in the Switter's data, maybe. It's there, I think they say so that you can use it for an ATP grant. You can have the public say what they think, where the near misses. And then you can produce a heat map to add to your grant application. So I think it's live all the time. I know I threw some stuff in it, which is also another thing, I guess, like you kind of want to be able to reset it maybe every now and then, maybe, so you don't have
Oh, I see, yeah.
ancient legacy. I don't know, you know, how that works, and it says Caltrans, so maybe there's another version that's.
Is that populated by
By the public.
citizens, just anecdotal?
Mhm.
So which one, so you're not talking about the Caltrans one, you're talking about another
The
one?
one I know is called Street Story, but it's on the UC Berkeley Safe Track website,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
And it does say Caltrans Street Story, so.
Mhm.
Is the city equipped to receive videos from cyclists who have near misses? A lot of cyclists now use cameras. And can you download, in the case of a near miss or even an accident, download the video onto the city website?
I think
onto the website, onto the website.
Sure.
No.
The email, yes,
But also.
Oh, okay. That's too good.
depending on the side, me. There's no formal process, right?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
There should be, because more and more cyclists use cameras.
Well, and to that point, a lot of people email the police department.
That's right.
And not the network 5 tip.
I can say this, but cyclists are not very trusting of the police department because they view things very differently than cyclists.
Right, so I think that the whole discussion is a valid point for future. As we move into the future, we should consider how to obtain and cross-reference the data on your misses. So. Yes.
Couple thoughts. I mean, it sounds like we're talking about the near misses and the other anecdotal data that were part of the LRSP. And then the other question is, what do we do going forward with sort of near misses that people are going to continue to give us as a city? I mean, one thing I'm staring at with this map with, the various points is, at the very least, it'd be interesting to see this broken down into sort of maybe more of a heat map or a more, roadway segmented approach. Because at this point, it's difficult to see the difference between, say, Central Mount Diablo and some of the other points. I can kind of see the concentration, but I think there might be a different way to articulate that a little bit, and that could inform what we want to do with it, or at least it'd be interesting to look at side by side in a similar way to the high injury network. I think otherwise the high injury network probably should be more informed by where the injuries are happening. But at the same time, we do want to continue to get these near misses, because again, it's often where people don't want to travel because they don't feel comfortable there. Otherwise, I'm interested in further capturing, near miss data, the anecdotal data the community brings to us. I would say that it's important to have some sort of a metric or standard operating procedure for seeing how close somebody, say, gets when they're turning too quickly into a crosswalk. Otherwise, it really is just one person looking at it. It's like, what do they see versus what does the other person see? It still could be a video that comes from a community member who's biking through here. But there are different ways to look at, recurring conflict patterns and how close does somebody actually get, and can we say what is too close and what is not too close into this bucket in different ways, and then that could be reported back out to the community.
I also wanted to comment that I've been collecting data that would feed into this, which is, I've been installing cameras around areas where I'm hearing, that there are concerns, like the roundabout and School Street. And so I've been collecting 7 days worth of video data that can be used so that we can take a look at what typical conditions are like. There may be near misses or not. But I have been proactively doing that based on what I'm hearing and where the safety concerns are.
Another source of information too is the police reports, of interactions and accidents. And that's something that we have been talking about, and when I guess the police chief comes here, we're going to talk about that more.
Yeah. Right.
Any additional comments about the contents of this table that we've been talking about, Susan?
I do, and this is kind of an overreaching thing, is it seems like, so on page 7 in the document, it's not really, it's kind of in the weeds, but the safe system approach is intended to be the lens through which all roadway safety decisions are made in Lafayette. And part of me goes, we gotta balance that with evacuation routes, right? And so I think we're missing the balance of, you know, how the lens we should be looking at all these things through. I think we have two lenses in Lafayette. It's not just the one lens, and there's a couple of different places where that comes up. And you know, like in the first item 1A, on the checklist, basically, we have the very first action is this like create a vision share process checklist. And it seems like we really need to get the fire department or police department in here as well when we create this checklist. And especially with the evacuation routes. And I sent out something, it probably didn't get to the LRSP, but the Berkeley Fire Department did just a real recent study about, you know, the intersection of Vision Zero and fire safety. And they came out very strong saying, you know, there's certain traffic calming things that we shouldn't be doing in certain areas, you know, and that makes sense to me. And so I think we need to somehow, you know, get that concept in here. I'm not exactly sure how, but I have a couple of ideas, but you know, like on the items where we've got the safety toolbox, you know, there's certain items in there that say, like on the safety toolbox on page 49. And wait a second. Wait a minute. And so item 3, where was it? Item 3, okay, so review countermeasures through the lens of the safe system approach framework. And it shouldn't just be the lens of the states, it should be through the lens of that and evacuation, right? And so maybe there's just add it in different spots. I kind of want to know what you guys think about how to add these things in.
I think you mentioned that several months ago.
I did, and it hasn't been included, and so we can do it every single time. It says through the lens of this, and we say, oh, and fire safety or evacuation routes, just in fires, earthquake, you know, right? So it's evacuation routes, and we can add that in all the different little places if we want to. And I can send you notes if you want me to, so we don't have to go through it.
I do have a question.
Sure.
I appreciate that, and I did read the Berkeley report, and I know when we were first looking at the Vision Zero policy, it was also very much about, and they're not here this evening, but having fire on the local road safety task force to talk about their concerns about where all of this fits in. And absolutely evacuation routes are important. What I'm trying to sort of test is there, when you put all of that in here, or in the safety countermeasure toolbox, you know, it says actual application of each or any safety countermeasure should be further studied and designed on an actual project by project basis. And in our Vision Zero discussions and policy, it was about also working with engineering, safety, all of those things to test it in the, as the project is potentially moving forward. So for example, I know one of the things that the City Gates study felt was a little bit of both, but that fire wasn't involved in the design and engineering of the projects for a road diet, for example, or a lane.
That's exactly where it is.
Right, and the lane narrowing. And we have been clear all along, so I'm not opposed to putting something in here about fire and evacuation, but we've been very clear all along that public safety, fire, schools, public health, all of the, and the public, I should say first the public, and then all those other entities would be part of these decisions going forward, so that we have all of those elements in our, and so I don't know that in the plan, it's should become a combined LRSP/Vision Zero action plan and an evacuation, but making sure we have the partnerships and the tools that each time we look at a project, this is the criteria we're also.
Right, so that's part of the checklist. right? Kind of like
Yeah.
put it in the checklist.
One possible approach also might be like on page 11, where they have the backgrounds, have all the background documents and so forth. That might also refer to an evacuation strategy or something.
That's a good.
Yeah,
good
that would be,
because
that's a great idea.
We have evacuation plans, so
We
it
do.
becomes a tool that we look at. Thanks, Carl.
That's a great idea.
Thanks for raising that, Susan, because I noticed that. I knew that you had mentioned it several times in these meetings, and then I was looking through the whole thing, like, where is it? Where is it? You know, I wonder about adding a map of the evacuation routes.
Yeah.
So that might see side by side.
Yeah.
You know, we're, you know, really looking at, because I always think about these things, like they have a life that, you know, they're gonna live for a while. What if we all, you know, retire and go move to, I don't know where. Between California, they're gonna pick it up, and you know, they may not know about this
Exactly.
conversation, so if we don't actually document, I think
that's a great idea.
we may lose some of this good idea.
And I agree. I think Carl referring to it in the same way as we refer to the general plan and about,
Yes.
interpreting that's what you meant. And the was that.
It's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for action 5 for the schools. I have a few things. One, it should include Alkalani's as well as Lafayette schools. That's a quick add. The other is within the document itself, I know we had talked at the last meeting to me, this was like the only place the schools had been teased out was in the state route. I didn't know if it was something we talked about maybe putting an emphasis within the local road safety plan. We didn't, it just isn't there. I don't know if we were talking about, or maybe I missed it upon reading it, but just talking about school safety in and of itself, just because it's such a hot topic for our community.
So any comments on that question?
I did think we needed to add, I think that it is referenced in particularly near schools and those, and I mean, I think those pieces and then here. The other thing though that I did notice in one of the very first, it's mentioned in the task force members, and we brought together a group of experts, and it says public health and life. And that was on page 13. She wrote it in my notes, but it doesn't say schools or education. Later it does say this was part of like the makeup and part of the people we got input from, because I think that partnership and that focus. And in looking at it again, we haven't provided. And then when it comes back to the city council, I'll also approve and Jennifer, but I felt like the schools were there, but
It wasn't really emphasized. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it was just kind of shown on a map, and we discussed it last time that maybe we were gonna include it more. And whether that didn't happen or it should happen, that's my question to the committee.
I have,
Okay.
couple questions.
Yeah.
On 12B, action 12B, it says that's completed, but is it, has it been? It looks like that maybe is an ongoing.
actually have that. To have to be ongoing.
Okay.
Part of it is completed, but. Sorry.
More?
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, that's a comment, but I
Yes,
think,
yeah.
I think it's the answer, we haven't fully completed.
I think you're right, yeah, we can change that to ongoing, yeah.
Let me just see, going outside of that, you know, I guess one thought came to my mind was, so this is our action plan, or, I mean, it is our Vision Zero action plan and our local road safety plan, but it doesn't really get into how to evaluate the trade-offs when you're looking at a project and within a Vision Zero framework. Because, you know, this is a starting point for that. And so, you know, you could have 100% success at meeting the goal, even by 2023 in 6 months, if we just say, no more cars in the city limits. That's it, everybody give them up.
Yes.
That's it, we're gonna have that problem. And yet, that's not feasible, so it's just an example of an extreme, so then where is that balance point, you know, 'cause we always are gonna have to consider the. You know, that transportation is an economic driver, right, it helps us get to work, it helps us buy products, you know, very base kind of level, and so I just don't know if there's any guidance the tool could provide, or even point us to if there's other cities or communities that have chewed on that, come up with any lessons from the trenches.
I mean, this doesn't preclude a planning, design, engineering project, right? And that's where the trade-offs are identified, they're articulated, and then the back and forth happens between the public and stakeholders and engineers. So, I mean, this is just giving guidance on what our emphasis should be, where our priority areas should be, but it's not going that far to say you must do this. It's not precluding a process that happens with any project.
So, yeah, so maybe this is not the plan where that would occur, but I'm just wondering if there's any resource out there that would start to illuminate. Basically, how does Vision Zero implementation go? Like, what are the patterns that other communities have seen, the successes, the rocky roads, et cetera. Maybe it's something we just have to go and do some research ourselves. And dig around.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mark. I don't want to put you on the spot, but are there any lessons from San Francisco that has a?
I think with the rubber hits the road on projects, and I think Patrick, your response was kind of spot on, is that, you know, this is what points us towards having a specific project in a particular street or particular neighborhood with a certain community. And I think it really just depends on what is proposed. There could be some projects that are just slam dunks and the trade-offs are pretty minor. Maybe it's a little bit of additional delay to traffic signal to do a leading pedestrian interval. I think most people would probably acknowledge that's okay. Whereas a more significant trade-off would be like a road diet, right? And then you're going to speak to all your stakeholders, you're going to speak to emergency services, the people that are using the road. I don't personally know of a resource that would help guide that. I mean, that is essentially like the planning and engineering profession, you know, help to facilitate those conversations with stakeholders and to reach a certain level of consensus. What will probably be the trickiest thing for us as a city is just educating people what Vision Zero is all about. Because I think people probably just have that mindset. You know, we started with a presentation here that a road is meant to be used to get places. Great. So now you're messing with it, you're messing with my ability to get somewhere. And I think it's key to kind of explain why we'd be doing that. Here's what has been happening over decades. People are dying. We want people to get places, but we want them to get there safely. But I think really that gets built out with projects. Patrick, I don't know if there's anything you have in mind that just, you know, as you evolve the city in terms of how we think about transportation projects, what, you know, new level of outreach could look like, sharing data with the community, evaluating that work afterwards. You know, that project life, right?
Yeah, right. And so, you know, part of it is articulating for any capital project, right? What problem are we trying to solve? Here's the data to support that. What are we proposing? What do we think that will do? And now safety and, you know, reducing death and serious injury, if there is any on that corridor or segment of street, that's a big part of the messaging and the premise behind the project.
Okay, so we'll navigate the waters as we go. Yeah, with the projects that are in front of us. Okay, that's fair. You know, I wanted to ask if the countermeasures were comprehensive, because I know these like self-selected for Lafayette. That's what they have on the title in the appendix. Lafayette countermeasure toolbox. Is this just kind of a subset of a universe?
I don't know that I could say that it's every single countermeasure that's available, but I believe it's pretty thorough.
And tailored for our crash factors and
It is tailored for our crash factors. It's gone through the Director of Public Works and Engineering over here to make sure that these are measures that we would implement on our streets.
Mhm.
And tailored to the roadway characteristics of Lafayette as well.
Mhm. Okay, but, one thing that we had emailed just about my confusion. I thought maybe out of this project, we would have the prescription for all of the high injury network segments and intersections, and I was like, where is it? So now I understand that that's going to be something that comes out of very specific initiatives to say, we are going to do something about this segment, high injury segment. And engage maybe a consultant to do further analysis and then identify those specific countermeasures. So I imagine that as part of that, maybe they'll introduce some new countermeasures to us. I mean, we're not restricted to the group that's been identified here.
No, you're not, and they would be more project specific. I mean, just in discussions today with the city manager and Patrick. Every capital project we have, if we're working on Mount Diablo Boulevard, will now take into account these types of things. More so than we used to just repave the street, so to speak, right? So, if we can squeeze inches off and give a buffer or a bike lane that wasn't quite there or had a gap, we would try and do those types of things, widen the sidewalk or do a leading interval or something different with the timing of the signals, things like that. So, but they're gonna be driven more project by project. Which could include, okay, we're looking at this network as a project, but this plan doesn't list out these projects and give me the next, 9 years of improvement plans.
Okay, right. So like mini roundabout, for example, is not on here. Like the little ones, like they have in, I think, Berkeley.
Well, it's in here. You can read that in here, yeah.
But in that actual list, the one that's with Lafayette's
Right.
countermeasures, I think it's not on there. So.
I haven't got enough. Whatever. Yeah.
Just that it was referred to.
It's in, I read it.
Yeah. It is.
What if anything, and maybe nothing, has been done to take into account events that we have here, like Art and Wine and Res Run and all that? Is there any kind of indication that I know that only happen twice in a year, but did we look at that at all?
I don't know that we did, because for those, we, for the most part, closed the streets.
Right.
And that takes care of, Stella said, we just stop cars. from
Right, but
moving
then
along.
we go out
So
into.
that might be the safest corridor we have. and,
Right,
but
that
it's
one,
two
but what
times a
about the
year.
artery?
Yeah, but everything around it, yeah. I don't know that this looked at special events per se, and those get their own traffic control plans. They get their own emergency services input and evacuation and health and safety
And the big
plans.
Yeah.
So, as you're well aware.
Right,
Okay, and that actually goes with what I was gonna say in terms of the countermeasure toolbox was I didn't see education in there, whether it be for the community or for students, which are community members as well. But so for instance, for the Art and Wine Festival or for other things, I feel like we have had education through emails through the city telling us, these roads are closed, please be cautious and blah, 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 which is great. But that would be, I think, to put in here, not just for the specific community events, but ongoing community efforts, especially at the school level.
We do have safe routes.
Right, and then in the
Okay.
countermeasure tool, like a tool to use is education, just
Okay,
information and education.
yeah, okay.
You had your hand raised.
Yeah, I was looking at the action number 5. Regarding the safe routes work. And point D, in terms of the evaluating the performance of the implemented safety improvements in school zones, it says collecting data on vehicle speeds and crashes. I think another way to evaluate the effectiveness of these expensive safe routes projects would be to measure the increased mode share of students biking and walking and having the schools, promoting and encouraging and educating kids and keeping traffic congestion getting better around the school. So the whole point of those great projects is to get more kids like him walking, so it's something about encouragement and.
So agreed, and 12B talks about it community-wide, but I agree by the schools, please. Allison, may I put you on the spot?
Yes, you may.
So anyway, might have sensed that you were, had a question about adding education as a countermeasure.
What I was gonna say.
Because I don't see enforcement as a specific action, but it's throughout the whole document, so I just wanted to.
So, safety countermeasures are physical changes. So education would be somewhere like in the actions and steps aspect of this plan. Because it looks at crash data, it looks at the context of the street and, yeah, specific to those kinds of details, yeah.
Other comments or questions? Yeah, Susan?
Yeah, so back to the countermeasures, is this something that where we can tag certain things in here, like for speed management? You know, a whole bunch of these things are great and we can totally do those on our feedback routes, but a road diet, put an asterisk on that, and maybe it's not for all, roads, it should be, that one should be targeted, we need to get fined. If it's, should we highlight those things in the toolkit that require us to go talk to fire? If it's on feedback route, and is this the place to put it? 'Cause right now it just says road diets all, and it's like, well, maybe not all, right? And so I don't know if we should do something in here that would kind of force us to make sure that we do the right thing.
I mean, fire should be, an ongoing stakeholder for any capital project, so.
Right.
I think that they can have input on the countermeasures that we are considering for any capital project.
Okay.
Can you refresh my memory? Do they, we have other agency evaluations of capital improvement projects similar to the way that we do on land use?
I don't think so. I think it's I don't think that there's anything that says we have to go.
We don't typically,
No,
Okay.
and that's why I'm trying to follow.
but it's not that we don't talk either.
Yeah.
And in the traffic calming plan, it'll address this as well, which is sort of a sister document to this, if you will. It's more how we would implement traffic calming, right? And that's gonna mention, for example, we're not doing speed humps on our arterials because those are gonna be your major evacuation routes and things like that. But there's a lot of in between.
I know, right?
Maybe a high collector or something else where it goes to the trade-offs and you have those discussions and you've had 7 accidents, but fire says, but you're gonna delay me 12 seconds more for everything on the other side of that speed bump if you put one in.
Right.
So,
Right, but I just want to make sure that they're in the process and they're not really in the process. So I don't know.
That's a geometric modification and so is roundabouts, and they're the only 2 in here, and it seems like, yeah, those would be the ones that you probably talked to the fire department.
yeah, when we just on the roundabout, I guarantee you.
Pause for a second on, I feel like that material is kind of an appendix. To some extent, I know you're tying it together with this, but as soon as we finish this up, I'd like to get back to the table and then finish this table up because I think you want to go through the rest of the document after this also. So, and then we can, I know we're gonna end up with the appendix.
Yeah, it says.
That's right.
Yeah.
So just
coordinate with emergency services, right?
Yeah, so my suggestion was maybe an annotation about geometric modifications, that those are special.
Right, geometric modifications are, I agree, that would be a way to.
But I'm probably not gonna ask them if it's on a residential street.
Fair.
Yeah.
Right, be able, so Carl, are we finished with policy programs and practices table?
Let me ask everybody else, are there other comments or questions about this table?
I actually have,
Yeah.
which is a general question, is probably a quick answer to it. When I first looked, there's 1, 2, 2.25 pages of a lot of stuff in here in very small print. So my question either for Patrick or for the consultant is, who's gonna do all this stuff? I mean, all the things that are outlined to be done. I assume that's gonna be a staff action. Or maybe consultants will help out with this, or maybe other people, but, you know, who does this, and is there some order to this? Because there's a lot of stuff here. I just want to get a better idea of how this is all gonna be done.
You want to respond also on execution of the.
Yeah, so as is, the table like we've been talking about offers like recommended timeline for some of these aspects, who should be involved. Doesn't get like, I think, as granular as you're asking, as far as, I guess I'm curious, like what specifics like beyond that, right? I know this is high level as far as like, yes, this will be like, you know, Public Works and the police department that will talk this through. And we're envisioning this would happen in like the next 1 to 2 years. Are you talking about like getting even more specific about like a roadmap for that?
Yeah, a roadmap would probably be a good way to illustrate what I'm asking. Is there a roadmap, and who is the pilot? Am I looking at it?
I would get the pilot.
That doesn't necessarily mean everybody in here is like, you know.
Who's the driver? Yeah.
Like for instance, and that's what we try to indicate, for example, like Safe Routes to School program would not be, you know, something that like would build from the ground up, for example.
Okay. I have one comment and then a question. So the question is easy. The first far right column is labeled achievement. And I'm wondering whether it might be, since this is the Vision Zero Local Road Safety Plan document, whether that is really more, help me understand, is it more task force outcomes? Is that what that really represents? Because I mean, or these are the achievement, when you say achievements, these are the things that are going to be used for each individual action step and items. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it kind of varies depending on what the action or the step is. Like, for instance, you know, action 5A, which talks about assessing previous Safe Routes to School plan projects and so on. The result would be like a list of Safe Routes to School projects. So in that case, it's like an actual, you know, deliverable or document. When it came to the checklist, like you would have an actual checklist, and that is proof of like the achievement, right?
Right.
That makes sense.
It just was a little bit of, I was like, for the city council members in public who don't read this. You know, you come down and say achievements, you jump to, well, everything's done already, you know, so. It doesn't matter, it's wordsmithing, but the reason I thought of that is because if you look at item 14A and B, it talks about progress, you know, how to measure progress and so forth. And I don't recall reading it in the document, but when I was looking at the Walnut Creek LRSP, they had a specific section to discuss report cards, you know, measuring the performance ongoing. And so maybe I missed it, or maybe it was discussed, but is that something you want to incorporate, some discussion of report cards or measurements? I mean, it's listed here in that in the action section 14, but is there any additional discussion that needs to happen around that? Or is it thought out already? You know, or to be determined?
I think it's to be determined. I mean, what's gonna happen is if and when council adopts this, right, then it becomes my document to execute. And so we can have further discussions at future TransCirc about how progress is evaluated and reported.
Okay.
But that would be a task of mine.
I didn't know if you wanted to incorporate anything into this document, and that's fine. It's fine, because this is where we're gonna do, where we're gonna go. That's fine. Okay. Is everybody good with this one, this table? Yes.
And I think it is related, I think it's in this table, but again, would you refresh my memory? I did read somewhere that the task force will continue as part of or with the Transportation and Circulation Commission. And I was trying to understand, is it this LRSP task force then works when called upon, or if something comes up related to Vision Zero? Is that a new group under TransCirc?
My intention is a subcommittee under TransCirc,
Okay.
rather than having a whole new, separate task force or LRSP commission. Which would be challenging to,
And it's the Vision Zero / LRSP Task Force or LRSP / Vision Zero Task Force that's a subcommittee under TransCirc.
hasn't been established, TBD. But
Okay.
that's my intent, that's
It's
what
really
my
the
take.
title of the report and the
Yeah.
intent of the report to
Yeah.
have them continue forward. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, I think, moving on, the next slide in the document would be on slide 49 where we left off. Proactive systemic roadway improvements.
But you've got more PowerPoint, I believe. more
Yes, there
presentation?
are more.
Okay.
Okay, I didn't know if that was incorporated in your PowerPoint. Sorry.
Great, yeah. So stepping back, so that was the first prong of the safety strategies offered as part of this plan. Moving into the next prong, which is high injury network projects. So what I really want to emphasize is the difference between high injury network projects and systemic safety improvements. So high injury network projects is looking at the crash data and determining what safety countermeasures will be used to address based on that data, based on what you've seen. And so I will walk through an example of that using Moraga Road slide. For instance, looking at the crash history, we determined that the crash concerns are pedestrian crossings at crosswalks, vehicles turning, failure to yield. So what we do is we take those aspects that were indicated by the detailed crash data. We consult that safety countermeasures toolkit. And for instance, you would look at things like high visibility crosswalks and leading pedestrian intervals, which I've already seen in several locations throughout the city just today, which is since crashes at this particular, along this particular roadway involved a conflict between the motorist and pedestrian. A leading pedestrian interval is something that's going to give pedestrians the advantage. It's going to make them more visible. Curb extensions as it relates to vehicles turning. Curb extensions are a tool that we can use to slow vehicles down while they're turning. So there's just more time for people to like see each other and act accordingly rather than at a faster speed. You're not going to be able to make a decision as quickly. So as you would continue to like craft a high injury network project, like I said, looking at the crash data itself and considering countermeasures that are appropriate for those kind of safety concerns. You'd also review community input, prior planning work for other potential needs and ideas that you want to address, whether it be lighting or other aspects. And I'll also emphasize, like, what I've talked about here in terms of countermeasures, there are things that would need to be reviewed further, refined. So just want to put that disclaimer on them that again, we've talked about evaluating trade-offs, like that's all just like would be part of this like more detailed project that would like happen down the line. And so the idea would be to regularly evaluate these safety countermeasures that get implemented. If they're working, great. You could consider implementing those same improvements in like other areas that have similar characteristics. Or else if those particular countermeasures are not proven to be effective, you would revisit and like adjust your approach. So those are specific improvements related to specific instances, as opposed to citywide systemic roadway improvements. So these are proven effective safety countermeasures that are beneficial for all roadway users. And again, disclaimer with the install everywhere. It's not as simple as install everywhere, right? You still want to like, consider your context and consider the situation, but These are, like I said, things that are proven to like improve safety and, as far as like a hierarchy goes, limited resources being available, you would want to focus on these high injury network. These high injury network segments first, and then, and you know, make sure those have like, and see about systemic roadway improvements along those. And then you would look to go citywide with those. So is that clear what the difference between those two prongs of safety strategies is? Okay, great.
Karen, I understand it, you've explained it very well, but I still have, my original concern is, you're so focused on initially the high entry network, that you're avoiding areas where the public really feels there has concerns about safety. Like central Mount Diablo Boulevard.
But we're trying to, going back to slide 1 or 2, what we're trying to do is address serious fatality and serious injury crashes, right? That's the premise behind this plan. So now you're getting into what people feel is unsafe, and that did factor into the plan, but fundamentally what we're trying to do is eliminate fatalities and serious injuries.
Fatalities and serious injuries are very serious. And I don't want to down, you know, I understand that. But when you just look at the amount of concern that was shown on that one map, where people really have concerns about safety. And central Mount Diablo Boulevard and other places, you know, St. Mary's Boulevard, St. Mary's Road, others, other areas too. It just seems to me that too much focus is being placed on those areas where there were a few serious, I understand serious, but a small number of accidents versus areas where people are really concerned.
This also doesn't preclude, I'm sorry, interrupting who was speaking, doesn't preclude implementation of the bikeways master plan or the walkways master plan or the Mount Diablo specific plan that's about to be, you know, underway. So there are other parallel efforts that are also happening. So this doesn't preclude those.
Yeah,
Those plans.
So Bart, when I looked at this, I actually had the same exact thought as you. We left out Mount Diablo and Rock Road. But this is a programmatic, standardized local road safety plan that is data driven to get you those high entry networks. And statistically, we don't have it at that location, and that might be the single most, you know, concerning location for the average pedestrian or bicyclist. That's not lost on the city. I mean, we know that, so we're not going to avoid that. But this plan is kind of driven to qualify you for grants and things. And they're not going to look at that if you can't check that box that you've had a serious injury or fatality. So that's it's kind of forced into this mold, and you can probably speak more to that, but I'd say it's forced into this mold. And I think that we have to address those other things with their downtown specific plan updates and the bike and walkways master plans and things like that. But your comment is not lost on the city. I'm really glad we did that map and got broad input from the citywide. To me, that's a very important piece. It just may not be shown like you would like it in this plan, but the data is not lost. I actually think it was maybe the most important thing we did in the whole process.
And I'm sorry, because I know some people that wanted to speak. So as part of that web map survey, the great thing was it a lot more than just points on the map. It was also the open-ended, tell us what you think here. What makes you feel unsafe? What makes you feel safe? What have you seen elsewhere that you might want to see here? So there is a tremendous amount of data that we now have, right, that we will use as we initiate projects.
I understand.
Jennifer?
It relates, but it also relates back to my comment about the schools. I see it fitting in, I guess, more with systemic than a high entry network. But I do see it, like Bart is saying, as somewhere that the community has said as a problem, but also the city has made an emphasis to make changes.
And I don't know, to Mike's point about using this document for further funding in different areas. Do we need to kind of have a paragraph or have a page or something that has the schools on there, but does it help us later with funding? Because we, like I'm saying before, we're not, like on the maps, there's one page where it says schools, but in terms of maybe there's something where we can show a map where the schools are and then relate it back to the appendix in the back where we're talking about safe route to school. But I'm not the expert in it. I'm just saying if it will help us get funding, perhaps that's the place to put it in.
It's something to consider, although this also doesn't preclude the whole school safety project that Mike led and leading the implementation of. So, I mean, that work is ongoing and was funded by council. So I think it's a similar comment to Bart's in that it is something that's being addressed through those plans that were put together 2 years ago.
Oh, 100%. And I just guess because it is our local road safety plan, it just felt strange to not see it teased out here. That was hard.
So two things, but I'll start with Jennifer. So kind of back to what Carl suggested on evacuations versus, and you might be there, but the local road implementation, whatever that program was called, it's basically our safe routes to school, but it's the project that Mike was working on. Does it make sense to refer that report in here? I hear you, Patrick, that it doesn't, even if we refer to we don't refer to any reports, they're all interrelated, but since we did talk about some others, should we put that in here?
Yes,
Yeah. So I think that's
You
good.
put it in there, yes.
And thanks, Jen. And so then on what Bart is talking about, the part where the bulk of the things at Mount Diablo and Moraga Road. And if I say the wrong Moraga Road Boulevard, please bear with me. But that particular spot is the top of that, right? It's Mount Diablo to Old Jones Road. And so so I interpreted, I appreciate you bringing it up, I interpreted it as that being included in this. What it doesn't include is sort of off that between Mount Diablo and First Street in front of the Plaza Park, but I do think that the highest, I think it meets the concerns of the public. And I was trying to find the chart on 48. It did have the highest number of pin drops on the web map. So I appreciate all of the ways we're going to make all these things happen, but I do think that particular corner, I was comfortable that it was there and covered within this, but just my 2 cents.
Okay. So I think we're good with your differentiation there. You want to keep going?
I have a comment on, when you talked about, gave the example of Moraga Road.
Right.
And applying your countermeasures to that one as an example. And again, I understand that in your example, the countermeasures were focused on the history of accidents there, which were primarily pedestrian accidents. But I noticed, and I only bring this up because I'm a bicyclist and I bike on that part of Moraga Road, that there was no mention of countermeasures or measures to improve one's ability to bicycle on Moraga Road.
Right.
It was all focused on improving things for pedestrians.
Yeah, it was.
So,
Oh, I was just gonna say, I really tried to kind of keep it tight as far as the example went. I wouldn't consider when I went over like a holistic look at like the crash data and like a full list of like the countermeasures. So it was pedestrian focused, but.
okay.
If I might make a suggestion on that page 50 is where in the report is where the example is. And my first thought when I read through that was you really ought to include in the green tile there the word example. like.
Oh, example.
Yeah, so that people know that this is a example of this. And you could also, you could incorporate Bart's idea by saying example, pedestrian
Yeah.
safety or something.
Right,
of that nature.
right, make sure it is clear that it is specific and.
Yeah.
These are nice patches, yeah. All right. That actually wraps it up.
Or do you want to go over the workshop-y portion or complete the PowerPoint?
Though, as far as, looking at some, like, kind of how we did with the actions and steps, like, go and like look at specific aspects of it. And I know we already got into some of this, not to say that we covered it completely, but, as far as if we could step back in the presentation a little bit, where a couple places were specifically, obviously we want input on the whole plan itself, but there was a couple other places that we actually include the link on that particular slide, for instance, slide 30.
So this one?
One more.
Right, yeah, so these are just like a couple other aspects that we call out specifically for you all to have a look at, and if you already had, we can get into those like a little bit deeper. As well as, so those high internet projects, as well as the systemic safety improvements. I do feel like we've kind of gotten into those, but if there's anything else we wanted to talk through it right now and look into those.
Do you want to open it up to the countermeasures in the back, which we started to talk about, but these are the high injury network.
Yeah, I also want to open up to general comments on the entire document. But if you actually, as I've been following along with the presentation, we're close to the end of the document, right? So, which was program evaluation. So, yeah, I'm open to going through the appendix, but I think I'd like to go through the report first. I mean, unless people would like to talk about the appendix first. Anybody have a burning desire to do that first? Okay, then let's go through and let's do it this way, because we need to go through and give comments, and then we need to get public. I don't know how many people are online.
There are 6 attendees.
Okay, so chance we'll get public comments also, and then around 8 o'clock, we're gonna take a break. So, let's start with just general comments people have about the report, things that you think are lacking, or things that need clarification. Anybody have general comment?
Can I have a fun one?
Yeah.
I'd like to see a different cover image on the front page.
Yeah.
I'd like to see something with human beings and people in the Lafayette. Yeah. Maybe it's something in Central Mount Diablo that it shows people walking, biking, and
Fair.
the whole spread. Yeah.
Thank you. I had that same comment.
Definitely,
I wanted that much right away.
This is a draft report, and there will be some formatting.
It's my favorite.
Yeah.
Just-
Well, actually, you know, very good. We were all agreeing with the changing of the photo. I said we made it look like it's not this.
Yes.
Really focusing on the pavement,
Yeah.
My first thought was figure 23, or it might be also, and I had the same comment. I don't know if you have an example where you can do a scene from before and after some LRSP action has been implemented, but I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just those were thoughts I had when I was looking at it also. Thank you for that comment. Anything else, Mark?
Not the tip of my tongue.
Okay. Other people?
I have one,
Okay.
just one comment for the review of the existing transportation plans. I think that what's in the current circulation element could be described. I think there is a portion that talks about multimodal bicycle and pedestrian. And I thought the last sentence was a little bit kind of ahead of.
So what page are you on?
Oh, sorry, page 8.
So this is the circulation element. Little
Yeah.
segment, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a description, the existing transportation plans and mention of the general plan. There's no mention of what's in the current plan, which is what we have on the books. And so I think there is relevant policy programs
Okay.
related that could be mentioned. And then I thought the very last sentence was a little bit ahead of itself in terms of what will actually be in the revise, given that GPAC hasn't gotten there yet,
Yeah,
hasn't even started land use, so.
okay,
That's the end of page 8 or
Just the last sentence.
policy sharing.
This is cultural policies will be written to do these things and. That may be true, but it's also ways out. It's-
yeah, okay.
All right, Susan had her hand up and then Jen.
Yeah, and so the, on page 5, it says Lafayette is close to reaching vision 0, hopefully do so through, and I'm like, are we close to reaching 0? I'm like, no. It's more like, we're on our way.
And you want, yeah, I think that's more appropriate way.
Yeah, okay.
Because, you know, like I said, these are still, you know, fatality and serious injuries, so I'm gonna be like, well, we're just almost there, you know, it's not.
It was also mentioned earlier in the meeting, and also it's mentioned in the policy section to the 2033. So if you don't want to date, well, it's going to be dated this point anyway, you could incorporate that into the end there so that people know that there's a period of time. All right, Susan.
And then on page 7, I just think this is more of a, you know, it's right, it says the safe system approach groundwork should be used in every roadway project to ensure that if a crash occurs, it's like, are we gonna put it in every roadway project? Or, I mean, it seemed like that was just kind of general. Like,
That, you know, that is more general, but,
because we're probably gonna do stuff that doesn't go in here, that's a roadway project. And I just think, I don't know, I was thinking, sorry.
So it should be, but it will be.
What's that?
It said should be rather than will be.
Yeah, it should be used in every roadway project. Okay,
That's the goal with the vision 0.
right. General. But that's what Vision 0, not a.
Which the safe system, well, that was I wrote it down,
Right.
actually, at first I was like, you know, it's vision 0, but
It's
the
the
safe
same,
system and
approach,
vision
okay.
0, and that's how we're looking at it.
because it seems like we'll have road projects in our city that won't be part of that, like on, you know, in the corner housing project, we won't put this in. Like, I don't know, I was just thinking.
Well, on the private road portion, but
Oh, the private road.
we would look at the site improvements around it as the public, who would
Okay,
evaluate circulation around it.
okay.
Are you good?
And one more, I was surprised that we had that outlier RVR in the north, and I know we had a bike fatality out there, right? And there's just 2 pins. We did have a fatality, I get that, and the reason why I'm asking is that we have so many roads like that, right? It seems like we have a lot of our roads are like that, and if we include this one and not all the rest of them are like that, is that a problem for Lafayette?
So
You know,
again,
it's
it's
Back to
data
having
driven.
the data,
Yeah.
It is data driven, right?
If we had a 5-year period from 2005 to 2010,
Well, we went to different places, yeah.
we have almost no data to be talking about. You know, we had some unfortunate serious injury and fatalities during this kind of 7-year period that Lafayette's never seen before in any, you know, 1 or 2 over a decade kind of thing. And then we had several within the 7 years. So again, it's data driven. You have any fatality. I mean, I don't know if this is
I know, it's
good or
like-
bad. You can look at it any way. We haven't had serious injury or fatalities. We haven't had 2 of them right near each other. You know, they've all been spread out, and for for this type of plan, you can't focus those and say, well, this is definitely a spot we have to do something about because we had 4 serious injury accidents here in a short period of time.
Right,
We haven't,
right.
you know, and in fact, that's kind of what this group was debating at one of our previous meetings is there isn't a lot of intense data. But when you have one as serious as a point as that, it skews it over to that location.
Right.
But what you have is a truck driver not moving over far enough to get around the bicyclists.
Right,
It just a fluke at one time.
Right, and no pins, you know,
Yeah.
that was, to me, it's just like,
And had that not happened,
there'd be no way.
you know, probably there wouldn't have been a lot of dots on that portion of the city.
Right, anyways, I just want
Jennifer?
yeah. On page 8 for the existing transportation plans, I was going to suggest to include the long-range action plan. The school plans, which we had discussed, and then I don't know if this is the right spot to just talk about how the city has a transportation action process or plan. I don't know if that was, you know, that's kind of separate. It's not quite a plan like these, but we are already doing it, and I don't know if it's a spot to put it.
Okay. That's a good thought.
Other questions, comments?
You're talking about the TARs, correct?
Yes,
Yeah, okay. I mean, and that kind of goes back to the whole near miss
yeah.
example too, right? Of how to quantify near misses, and that's another input point.
That is.
Art,
On page 7, where the goal of erasing all serious accidents, injuries, fatalities by 2033 is sort of nestled in the first sentence of that paragraph. And I think that that's our goal, to achieve that by 2033. Ideally, I think earlier, that should be highlighted, maybe even at the first sentence, its own separate paragraph is bolded, just so that really stands out versus it being just sort of part of that paragraph.
Yeah, on page 5, we've got it in a emphasis box.
What do you do? I missed that.
But add serious injuries to that emphasis box.
Oh,
That
right.
confused me.
Yes.
Yeah.
My other comment is that, and this is a tiny one, but I always get tripped over acronyms. There's an acronym on page 12, HSIP, HSIP, and that's not shown on the acronyms. I went back to the acronym list and I couldn't find it, and I went into a panic.
Good catch. Good catch.
Yeah, okay.
On acronyms, KA was a new concept for LRSP Task Force. Why not KSI?
I think we were being a little bit inconsistent about when we were using KA and when we were using KSI, and we basically just decided like, okay, we're gonna go with KSI, which is the fatal and severe injuries way of putting it.
So we'll go through.
So it says KA in the acronyms, but that will change.
Right.
We'll make sure it's consistent.
We'll
Yeah.
give another check for consistency.
I like KSI. I think it's more universal.
Thank you. So I had the same comment that KSI is used not only in the staff report, but also in a lot of other LRSPs that I've looked at. So that would be useful.
I have a comment on page 17 about the survey. It describes the last paragraph before the list that respondents provided this input, and it says last sentence, additional unsafe locations include, and I just thought maybe it should say cited include or perceived to be, just to differentiate that these are user feedback.
Not so definitive as.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they say it's unsafe, how can we say it's not unsafe? But just to make it clear that this is a public perception.
Yeah.
And then I think on page 25. So we're overachievers in Lafayette, I've heard, and the last sentence, the bottom of page 25. Once fatal and severe injury classes are resolved, then we'll go and do this, and that's really optimistic, so.
Very good
I
one,
mean,
Well, I guess back
it's a
to.
great thing to achieve,
right?
but, it just sounded like, okay, let's get that done, and this is gonna, and the reality is, our work's never really gonna be done
Right.
in this area.
Is the intent more of when a location on the HIM has been addressed, to use that learnings to go and put it elsewhere? Is that what you're trying to get to?
Yeah, that's how I read it.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, right, so that's, yes, that is referring to what I was saying earlier as far as, once things are, I think it's more so like, you can see that it's been effective. These countermeasures have been effective is when you would identify areas that have similar conditions and implement them there. So I think it could be, that sentence could be reworked.
It's more about street typologies, or is it still about on and off the high entry network, similar conditions?
I mean, I think you could say, I guess, it depends on how granular the improvement is. I think it could vary.
It's one of these
Is it more
changes
like-
are very new to Lafayette, right? It's once we see how people respond to them here,
Yeah,
that might inform how applicable they are to similar intersections and streets.
right, then that's the idea.
I have one last comment on page 30. Second to last paragraph describes the fixed object practice that occur along Pleasant Hill Road. And it's a really long road, and the dots are in a very specific spot. It's like Rancho View around that curve to the split. And so I just thought, making an extra notation, just to say, Pleasant Hill Road between here and there, just to frame the extent in the description.
Okay.
There's, I mean, it's amazing, there's like 8 or 10 dots up there, and just this one little area.
Is that the one on go, so as you're going on Taylor, as you go up towards Rancho View, right before there, now we have that new blockage there?
I don't know which direction the dots occurred,
Yeah.
but it's it's right there, it's where you start,
Southbound.
it's where you start to.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not southbound, it's the counties, and it should be in their plan.
So, wait, the northbound is the county?
Yes, it is, starting at Reilly's Valley Road, just north of Reilly's Valley Road.
Oh,
Yeah, the Monarch Ridge and all of those.
that's county, okay, so then if they're in our data set, they would be City of Lafayette, and they're all about.
And from Pleasant Hill.
Right.
Yeah, and so is that picking up, I mean, I thought I heard there were people that rolled there a bunch.
Oh, yeah, one of my son's really good friends, we call it the Riley Memorial Wall, where he almost died and don't even know how he lived.
I was going to say where I've heard many.
It has
high
nothing to
school
do with excessive speed whatsoever. But
So some of those.
Oh, more, right, I don't-
Look at the detail about it, so it's coming this direct,
yes.
and then they're coming downhill. Okay,
More, anyone?
that's all.
Any questions on this side? Yeah.
So
Colin?
for the maintaining the momentum, I was curious, we talked a little bit about data points for near misses, but for continuing the data collection to update this eventually, like how, I guess but it wasn't as specific. I was looking for, like, just recently there were 2 pretty huge crashes in the last month or so at Deer Hill and Pleasant Hill, right? Like very significant crashes. So maintaining the momentum, where are we capturing that data to update this eventually, or where could the public go to look at that?
That's a great question.
Yes, we ask that question every time that we meet.
Did you have slides on that, kind of the next, I saw you had a next step.
I think the next steps was
Oh, okay,
simpler.
provide comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, I have to, I think you said annually kind of report out on collisions, what we've done, new data that's come in. And so I've got to figure out how to do that in the format in which it's going to happen and work through TransCirc. But I don't have a specific answer for you right now.
Is there a way, also then, it would be great to do in some of them in real time, like I do know this, sometimes we get it from the police and sometimes we don't, but you know, I just happened to be on that road the day that those two happened and I saw them firsthand and they were severe, but didn't come out kind of. So I guess I would just say, when you're doing your planning, if there's a process to alert the public of what's going on more in real time than likely to hear for it, it'd be great too.
Okay, let me think about that too. I don't know if that would come from me or police, but we are working, they now have a liaison that's working with me on sharing data. And, you know, we'd be more informed about collisions and the data they're collecting and vice versa. So that is starting to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Just thinking about that a little bit more, Patrick. In addition to the time frame, you know, shorter than a year, a lot of the reports that we get on just general police matters tends to have a narrative that helps people understand it versus just, you know, what happened, what was the police code that was cited, broadside. You know, these sorts of things people don't necessarily understand. And since we have so few fatal and severe collisions in the city, when they do happen, having an official like city acknowledgement of what happened, you obviously need to protect the privacy of the individuals involved, and it's an ongoing police investigation, blah, blah, blah. But to have some way for people to go kind of understand what they saw sooner. Yeah.
The local paper used to have descriptions of accidents and also of car thieves and so forth. And it was written somewhat amusingly. And but that has disappeared, and I wish it would come back. So we should have some kind of a list of what's going on.
Yeah, Jennifer Shaw, yeah, that's been a while. Yeah. And some people didn't like the tongue in cheek.
They didn't like what?
Some people felt, I mean, I think to the narrative point about just the facts, some people really liked the tongue in cheek about what was going on in our, you know, lovely community, and other people felt that it wasn't as taking it seriously. So
Like that
anyway,
news 24/680 with my Facebook is very.
yeah.
Let's have a quick process discussion. So we could take a break about now, or we could keep going. I've got some comments that I'm sure we can plow through, and I don't know if you've got more comments. We still also need to listen to public input, if there's any. So what are your feelings? Would you like to keep going for a little while?
I would get them before, so
Or let me say, would anybody like to have a break now? That's probably a more appropriate question to ask. Okay, let's just keep going then, all right? And then see if we can wrap it up sooner rather than later, all right? Who else wants to give comments on the report?
I just have a quick question on page 29 where it has the data on the crash data. It refers to something that I just caught my eyes, the discussion on pedestrian crashes. And I just try to visualize pedestrians don't normally crash into things. They have accidents, but they don't crash.
Crashes involving pedestrians.
Yeah. Well, I figured that out. So it's just, I just looked.
Yeah.
Okay.
No? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll move through some things. What you've already got on page 3 about acronyms, thank you for the KSI change, and that also is in a lot of the figures and so forth. So make sure you pick those up. There was on page 23 a reference to EPDO, which I don't know if you want to include it there or not, it doesn't matter. Under the key terms section, the local road safety plan, that first sentence, I think it would be good to take that and export it and put it on the website, because the website, the LRSP website, doesn't really have a description of what the LRSP is. So that's something you might consider. Below key terms, we didn't get to really appendix A in depth, but there was a terminology section on Appendix A. You might consider putting a note after key terms or somewhere saying see additional terms in appendix terminology, or maybe not, that's just a thought. On page 4, under the consultant team, you might consider adding your name and others from tool. Some jurisdictions put the consultant's name on that. On page 6, and also another place, I find the graphic is a great graphic and it's hard to read. And I don't know if there's a reason for having yellow segment, some by segments highlighted or not. I sent an example to Patrick. There are black and white versions that are easier to read, all right? Let's see. On page 14 in the box, you'll know that we'll have to change, it says 5 task force meetings, really 4 since the okay. The graphic on page 27, figure 11, is a good graphic. I think it's too hard to read. I think it needs to be enlarged. If you can, you've got a little bit of space down below, if you can enlarge it perhaps.
Figure 11, that was.
Figure 11, yeah. When you have reverse text on color background, especially red, it's hard to read for certain segments of the population.
Yeah.
And so you might consider modifying that. On page 29, I didn't have a real problem following the mapping of the different categories to the graphs. But if someone prints it in black and white, you won't see it. So personally, I like call outs, although there's not that many, so for it just, if you think that it'd benefit from having call outs versus a table, I mean, a legend, you can just consider that. And I think that's about it. Yeah, I mentioned already.
On the following page is a call out for your surplus, actually, is there not?
Yeah. That's fine.
I'm sorry, what was that, Katie?
On the phone, page 30 is a call out.
It has this, yeah.
Okay.
And then I mentioned before, under maintaining momentum, we're not gonna put in report cards, so that's okay. And now we skipped over the whole countermeasure toolbox in Appendix A. I didn't want to stop anybody from providing additional input on that. Were there things that people wanted to have clarified? Teresa?
I was, if you didn't offer this as an opportunity, I did want to make sure that council member Susan's, since we're in our LRSP mode, her recommendation about putting an asterisk on things like, I mean, not to make it so narrow, but things like road diets, lane narrowing, this section on this second page that has roundabouts, mini roundabouts. I don't know if the same level raises to converting two-way stop to all-way stop, but I put an asterisk by that. But just to call that out is that we do, while we have the intent to make sure that we're interacting with all of our agencies, that we call it out and on those particular things that we talk to fire and public safety. So thank you, Susan. That was a good plan.
Thank you for reminding us of that. That's good. I think that is what I had. There was one other place, there was a list and I lost it. I'll write a note. There was a list of bulleted items and it wasn't clear if they were ranked by importance, and I'll find that and send it to you. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the countermeasure toolbox, variable speed limits, is that good or bad? And does that mean on a
Time of day?
stretch or time of day?
I interpret it as stretch, but it can be time of day if it's a school zone, for example, because it's only enforced during plus or minus school hours, right?
Time of day makes sense, but if it's a stretch, like where you're going from a segment that's 40, and now it's 35, now it's 45, I mean, that seems,
That's like.
in my mind, not the same, exactly.
25, 35.
Yeah, I perceive that as not safe, that's just me, so that's why I wasn't sure what variable speed limits.
I think it's reflecting the land uses around it, right? The land uses would influence the speed that you should be going. I mean, we're limited by state law on setting speed limits, so this is severely restricted by state law, but yeah,
Okay, so this is like context sensitive. speed
Yeah,
limits or such.
Get a better way, yeah, I think.
but maybe we should be more clear on that.
Any other remark?
Page, it was the last page of the countermeasures of bicycle facilities. And the two countermeasures are, well, there's three of them, but the two that are all out associated with, bikeway classes, are class 2 and class 4. There's four classifications for bike routes or bike lanes or whatever, 1 through 4. These only call out 2 and 4. I'm just wondering where's 1 and 3.
And bike boulevards are one of these 4 or?
Bike boulevard 3. That's class
That's
3.
narrows though, isn't there separate separate concept for bike boulevard? No?
And maybe you would want to put that as like a particular client kind of class 3.
That's what I thought, I mean, I just remember Charlie Knox was talking a lot in our last TransCirc meeting about how he likes bike boulevards and they have certain characteristics, but I thought that meant it is a class 3, but it has those certain special characteristics. I could be wrong.
Go ahead, Mark. I was gonna say there are treatments that you would use, right? And that would include sharrows, but not necessarily. It could mean restricting vehicles on bike boulevards. That's done in some places, San Francisco, for example.
I think you achieve like a slow street or a bike boulevard by taking many of these treatments or countermeasures and combining them onto one thing. I think that, this is my own personal opinion, but I think the bikeway class system is becoming a little bit archaic. And cities are thinking a little bit more about, the network, the framework, which of the streets do we want to prioritize for bicycling to connect different land uses, schools or downtown, that sort of thing. But then again, it I guess becomes a project. It's like, what are the issues here? People are going too fast, people feel uncomfortable with the traffic volumes, and then what are the tools that we can use? And I think as long as we have some of those other items here to calm traffic, or maybe we do, maybe we don't. So that could be for discussion. Yeah. I mean, we have speed humps. Do we have measures to control volumes? Speed management, lane departure. I don't think we do.
I don't think we do either. So you're proposing, or at least for discussion, eliminating the classes of bike treatments or projects, instead the measures that you might use to help implement them.
I don't want to downplay like the emphasis on bike facilities, on bicycle riding. Like I think that should be there. If you're thinking about something that's more of a slow street stop thing, we're manage traffic speeds and volumes, and that's beneficial to everybody. Could be a compliment. Yeah, and I wouldn't know how to position the crash reduction factors for some of these things, but maybe we could investigate those further if we do propose different items.
Are we limited to these items? Or like,
No.
this is our exhaustive, like, if we think of something better, it's not like we can't use it, right? So that's,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that's true.
That's true.
Okay.
Yes.
Fine.
Best practices change, and we're collaborating right now. I'm collaborating with other Bay Area cities on some of the bigger questions we're grappling with. So we could add countermeasures to this or remove if they're not working, right? And that's part of the evaluation process, which is what's working, what isn't. Yeah. Iterative.
I mean, essentially, the only other item would be essentially traffic diverter. Because I think if we're thinking about different categories of streets, then we're thinking about the column, which is roadway type. And I don't think we've really established that as a city. I mean, we have our bike routes, we have our are routes that are alternatives to Mount Diablo that you can use to get to the fire station and that sort of thing, but that. A little bit more nuanced, I think, than just collector local. Maybe that's something we consider for the next local roadway safety plan, we get to a level of sophistication with roadway type. But I would position traffic diverter as a possible addition.
So, before we go to Teresa's question, so I want to make sure I understand. So on the section that Bart highlighted, will you be clarifying that, removing the classes or adding on the class one and?
Well, we should have class one for sure, because we've got our class one project coming up, so,
Well, Patrick, do you have to be careful if you eliminate the classes?
no, I know that, I know, right.
We're assuming the state would understand what we're,
Right.
that's a bad assumption. That's all right.
Yes.
Sometimes we have to use their logo, their lingo.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
We see you had your hand raised.
Actually, you asked the question, did we get back to addressing why class one and three were not in that particular kind of measure? I think that we discussed it. And we'll take that into court's concern and consideration.
And what's a bicycle box? I don't know.
Oh, I looked it up. But I wanted to you to describe it because
Yes.
I looked up circulating.
Right, so it's a painted area that sometimes it's like at the front of a travel lane and it's meant to like more or less like give bikes priority or position themselves ahead of vehicles to go first.
At an intersection.
At an
Yes,
intersection.
yeah.
And then there's also a type of bicycle box that is meant to position a bicyclist for a left turn. If you're like crossing the intersection, you pull off into the bike box and you position yourself to take a left turn rather than merging over to a left turn.
Never seen such a.
Oh, no, there, in the city, unfortunately, there's a lot of them. Very,
First, when I want to talk about again, but
yes.
Any more questions? And otherwise, I'd like to call for public comment. Now we have one person in the audience here. Do you have any? Okay. At this point, members online, members of the public, if you want to use the raise your hand feature, if you have comments or questions about what you've heard tonight.
Yeah, so we have one hand raised right now. Dawn, I'm going to allow you to speak and then you would unmute yourself. Okay, so Dawn, you have permission to speak.
Hello, Don? Okay. At this point, members online, public members of the public, if you want to use the raise your hand feature, if you have comments or questions about what you heard tonight.
Yeah, so we have one hand raised right now. Dawn, I'm going to allow you to speak and then you would unmute yourself.
Am I available to speak?
Yes. Now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay.
So Dawn, you have permission to speak.
Hello, Don?
Hi, I apologize.
Don, may I make a suggestion on your computer? Would you hit the sound mute so we don't hear the feedback? And, no, not the microphone, but the volume. The speaker volume. So if you make sure you're unmuted, but your volume on your system is down. Now I can hear you. Go ahead.
You can hear me? Okay.
Hello, Don?
Yeah, I apologize.
Don, may I make a suggestion on your computer? Would you hit the sound mute so we don't hear the feedback?
Sound mute.
Just your volume button. Okay. Don, why don't you go ahead and make your statement and then we'll not talk. We're not hearing you.
Oh, Doris is muted.
Hello,
Okay.
is that better?
Oh.
Okay, I apologize, but I'm not super computer savvy, but.
And then we'll not talk.
Okay. I wasn't part of a lot of the community meetings, unfortunately, but I sent in an email earlier today with an addendum that corrected the 3 items of the type of accident. Hello? Hello?
Keep going.
Okay.
Better?
But I wanted to question why Mount Dab not super computer savvy, but. Okay. I wasn't part of a lot of the community meetings, unfortunately, but I sent in an email earlier today with an addendum that corrected the 3 items of the type of accident. Hello? Hello?
Keep going. Keep going.
Okay.
Better?
But I wanted to question why Mount Dab was not super computer savvy, but.
Okay, hey, Dawn.
Keep talking. I wasn't part of a lot of the.
So Dawn, I think we did get your letters, and I think what you're asking is for a response to the letters that you sent in this afternoon. So if it's okay with you, we'll have Patrick or Mike, let's say Patrick, give a response to your letters, and what's the next steps in responding to your letters.
Keep talking. I wasn't part of.
Okay, so if Donna, if that doesn't work out, then send me an email or send Patrick an email. But Patrick, would you care to mention what Dawn said in her letter?
Right, so the question was about the eastern segment of Mount Diablo Boulevard, and essentially, if there aren't that many collisions, why is it part of the high injury network? And so I'll provide a detailed response to that. I'll go back to the crash data analysis and we'll dig into that.
And also she was asking about the safety at Hampton Road, which was from many years ago. And I think that was the RR rapid flashing beacons request. That I think I don't want to say why we didn't do it, but that would be something to include in a response. And if you don't mind copying the Transportation Circulation Commission and the other members here.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so sorry for the technical difficulties tonight, Dawn, but we understand your concerns and we'll get back to you. Okay. Is there anybody else have a hand raised online?
Next is Cheryl. I'm
Okay.
gonna allow Cheryl to speak.
Hello.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hi. If Dawn wants to call back in, it's up to you guys, but if she just walks away from her computer with her phone, maybe that would work for her better if she wants to. That's up to you guys, but it was just a thought. I had the same questions that she had, so if you could see me in the answer, that'd be wonderful.
Okay.
And then I had a question. One is, can you define road diet? I don't know. I can imagine what that means, but I don't know what it means. I'm really concerned about public engagement. If there's something that's going to be happening in the different parts of the downtown that you use next door or some form of communication. The workshop was that was held at the library was like 45 people, and it was right after the pandemic and the doors opening again, and I think there was a lot of nervousness about that. And so public engagement is a priority for me. when you go into the different areas. I also was looking online and I found that there was a bicycle kind of accident at Mount Dale Boulevard and Moraga Road. So I think that the concerns of where all the dots are really put in by the public should be kept in there. And I think it would be a disservice to if you took them out in any way to the people that participate in that workshop. I think the council has talked with Nairobi about public engagement before grants and projects are started. I'd like that to be included if that goes through. I'd like that to be considered for any project that happens in this regard as well. I think that there's someone made a comment long ago about what is Vision Zero. I have an idea what it is and I've been involved in it, so I can imagine that a lot of people don't know what it is. So how can we get the word out? What is Vision Zero and how does this apply to all the projects that you all are talking about? My other question is, and this may be what you're replying to John at, is I looked online to some of the hyperlinks on your staff report that took me to something that started with an S. It was an acronym for something, SWITRS. And it only had 2019. And then a lot of the information was just county oriented. The other one went to Berkeley, and I don't really want to enroll in anything that I have to get information in. So where is all the data that you are providing, all the accidents and all that? Where is that coming from? I haven't been able to find that anywhere in the staff report. And so I think that would be really good. I tried to look the City of Lafayette Police Department and it wasn't really there either. So how are we going to get that information out? And I think both are really, really bad, but I think there should be a separation between deaths and serious injuries. So when there are 14 deaths / injuries, I think that should be split up somehow. So is the dot that is listed in the staff report, does that mean a death or a serious injury? And I think that is, they're both bad, but I think they should be separated and labeled as such.
Cheryl.
Yeah.
So wrap it up.
Oh, sorry, I don't have a timer on my thing, so I have no idea what I'm.
Yeah, no, it was a subtle beep. So.
Okay, and then I'll finish up by just once again public engagement. I think 9A, B, and C kind of talked about public engagement just being vitally important, and using Nextdoor. And someone was talking about accidents in the future. 68024 might be an interesting place. I just public engagement. If you're going to do anything in a project, including a housing project or anything, just please let the neighbors and anybody know. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, for your comments. So I that she raised some good questions. I don't know if you want to go through some of those now. So just real briefly for the public that didn't know what a road diet is. Sure. You want to explain that real quickly?
Should we take that? Yeah. So a road diet is when a travel lane is, at least one travel lane is removed from a roadway and repurposed for another use, such as a bikeway or parking, or if the curb lines are going to be moved, that happens as well. But that's what a road diet is referring to. It is a reduction in lanes.
Thank you. Was staff able to note the location of the bike accident she mentioned? Or is it important to look into or not? If not, no.
It's not going to be part of this.
No, not part of this, but for other, for other things. Okay. I want to mention on behalf of, and I'm going to get to this later on, I want to thank everybody who's been involved in this process, but I wanted to remind Cheryl that there were 4 meetings of the LRSP Task Force. Now, Patrick sent out an email today, presumably to this body, asking for us to put notes in? Is that open to the public, or is that strictly for the TCC and the task force?
This document has been uploaded to the project webpage. And so, as part of the weekly roundup, there was information on downloading and providing a comment to me.
Okay,
Yes.
so that was feedback for Cheryl, that if you or others in the East End have concerns, that you can also include those comments ongoing, okay? Regarding data sources, that's a whole meeting probably on data sources. Cheryl was questioning, she went to sorters and so forth. I don't know that really impacts what we're talking about here. So the other question though about splitting up deaths versus injuries, is that done anywhere? It seems like I've always seen them linked together. Is that a standard practice?
I'm not aware of whether or not it's standard, but I think often they are grouped together.
All right.
Because the goal is to eliminate both categories,
I
right?
understand. So my question was, is there any benefit to doing that given the amount of, accidents that we have? I don't know. So.
How do you quantify what's a serious injury versus a not serious?
No. So, okay, so those were all her concerns. I don't have anything else. So.
One thing I heard her say, and I think it's a great suggestion for the Appendix A safety countermeasure toolbox. She asked for definition of road diet, and I was looking at the slide deck that Tool presented from the last LRSP meeting, and there's a slide, I don't have the number, but it's draft safety countermeasure toolbox, and it's actually a nice table that has like a little graphic, which is what is the thing, and then purpose. And so if that was possible to produce for the appendix items, that might be really helpful.
This is from the fourth.
It's from the fourth.
Okay.
Yeah, I can show it to you after.
Yeah.
Oh, and I had one other thought. In the beginning of the document where it's listing the references and it mentions the Vision Zero efforts, safety system approach. It might be worthwhile putting a link to the city's Vision Zero page, because in her comment, she's like, where do you find out more information about it? So if you want to just include a link there, that might be useful.
And I think also Cheryl at the very end, and actually throughout her comment, was reminding everyone that engagement with the community is extremely important as we go into this, and projects that might result from this engagement is priority. Yeah.
Is this visible on Nextdoor? She made that comment.
Not
Sorry?
next door.
No.
What was the question, Ben?
Is it visible on or a link to Nextdoor?
Can't ask a question or something, but no, that's not the city's social media forum.
Gotcha.
We're not responding, we're not tracking it, we're not, whatever conversations you want to have on the side as a neighborhood, you're having them on the side. There are direct routes to the city.
Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, so I think that the goal tonight was to delve into the materials and provide feedback. Are there other questions, clarifying questions, or other comments that you'd like to provide tonight?
Is there any more?
Yeah,
there's
one more hand raised.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for,
So I'm going to allow Dawn to speak,
okay.
and Dawn, you can unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hi, Dawn.
Okay, there's no feedback, I hope.
Yay. Terrific. Were you able to hear any of what we talked about?
Hardly anything. It was just so muddled. Sorry.
Let's start from scratch. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I wanted to question why Mount Iowa Boulevard from Willow to Pleasant Hill Road is in the priorities when there are usually only 3 priorities, usually in a suggestion, and there are like 6 or 8 sections of road. Why it's included as a safety high-risk area when everything there appears to be pretty well under control, with the center turn laning working, no banner distractions, the trails don't come out there, there's no foliage in the landscape medians with trees, The hotel has its own signal. Mount Diablo Court's going to be getting a signal. Bike lanes are marked. The speed has evidently been dropped kind of recently from 45 to 35. And I don't think there's been any fatalities on the long length of Mount Diablo Boulevard, at least from Willow, if not First Street. I don't know. But that was not identified. And then there was a TAR request that Mike ran, I'm sure remembers maybe, about getting an RFFB beacon at Hampton Road, and that would slow traffic down also. So I think one of the commissioners mentioned about high injury network is data driven, and the interactive map that the public had perceptions about don't jive, but the East End to me is fine, and reality should play a higher priority or impact than people's perceptions of what, how scared they are crossing the street. So for the few number of fatalities and injuries, if they're lumped together, like somebody mentioned, that in over probably 40 years since Mount Diablo has had that center turn lane, it doesn't warrant being a priority or as a high risk area. And it should be dropped from that list of 6 or 8 areas there. Especially since the bikeway, the Simpic, the DSP, and the walkway plans will address a lot of that. And I don't think you need to fix or change something that's not broken or not dangerous, as proven by the stats.
Okay.
So
thank you very much for those comments. And I think Patrick is also going to send you an email, but perhaps you have a quick response, or would you prefer not to?
Well, I don't have the crash data in front of me, and so I'll provide Dawn with a more detailed email tomorrow about what factors, data-driven factors contributed towards the creation of the high injury network. And then I'll respond to the question about the RFB at Hampton as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else?
That's all.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. So for this body, is there anything else that people would like to contribute? Then, if not, I do want to spend some time thanking everybody on the task force. Not only you guys who are here, but there's some people that couldn't make it, and I know I went through a lot of materials after the fact in the meeting stuff that you guys went through and the videos and everything. So I really appreciate all the work you guys did, and also with Allison. So that's it for this item for now. Okay. All right, then let's see. Let me go back to my agenda. All right, well, I lost my agenda. Yes, right. I want to go, okay, so new business, yes. Commissioner and staff updates. First, I want to go back to our desire had been to have at the first meeting of every month, have that section. So that might be a time when you can talk about the car that was referenced. Okay. Show and tell time. Anything people would like to share with your fellow commissioners or task force members? No? Okay. Then thank you for everybody attending. In this case, I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and thanks for coming, and thanks for being online also. So this meeting's adjourned. It is 8:33 p.m.
Okay, don't leave.
Stop.